Hey guys, so I had seen this post and it said something, I'll paraphrase, along the lines of, to women 40 and up, give some advice to some women in their 20s. And it got me to thinking about if I had the opportunity to go back and give 20-something-year-old Mika some advice, what would it be? So I have like a whole list of things, right? But I'm just gonna pull out a few. First off, when you are in your 20s, there is like this mindset that you are always going to be the young hot thing. And if this is something that you can relate to, ladies, by all means, please chime in. And I also want to know, if you could go back and tell your 20-something-year-old self something, what would it be? But there's like, this was my mindset, okay? So if you can relate, like I said, let me know. I always thought that I was going to be 20-something. I don't know why. And I think that when you're in your 20s, that's a form of being naive, right? And you think that that is your prime, and that if things don't get accomplished within that time, then you're no longer the hot thing. You're no longer valuable. It almost feels like that. It almost feels like that there is this unspoken word of certain things that you are just supposed to accomplish within your 20s. The only thing I knew in my 20s was that I did not want any kids. Like, that was the only thing I knew with certainty, that I had wanted my 20s to myself. But then thinking about like the grand scheme of things as far as like career and life, it always seems like that there is pressure to be put on us to, have a man, in your 20s, make sure that you get married, you're doing all this in your 20s, you find your career, and whatever your career is, you need to be successful. Like, everything needs to be accomplished in your 20s. So, being naive to the pressures that the outside world puts on you to do certain things in your 20s. What I would tell my 20-something-year-old self is that it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit, that there is no timeline. Because I feel like that there were things that I feel like that I fell into that, blindly, of all the things that I had needed to accomplish within my 20s. Career-wise, when, it was corporate America life, career-wise, relationship-wise, buying a house, like all that stuff. And guys, it's like, it's just bullshit. So it's like, don't feel pressure to conform to the things that society says that you are supposed to be in your 20s. One of the things that I've learned now, growing up and maturing, is that there is no timeline. That's like the biggest message. There is no timeline. There is no set, defined timeline. If you are healthy and you are active and you are constantly growing and you're pursuing, and there are things that, you're allowing yourself to evolve, and there are things that you want to accomplish, there is no timeline. Don't think that there are things that you need to get done in your 20s, or if not, then you're just washed up. You're just done. That's bullshit. So that would be like the first thing that I would tell my 20-something self. Don't feel pressured to have certain things accomplished within this 10-year time frame. And then if you don't beat yourself up over it, because everybody is on their own time. That's number one. So number two, I would have probably been much better with my finances. My 20s, I did the classic turn 18 and get credit cards and spending, and not accepting the fact that I need to pay that shit back, and it has interest, and understanding that your social security number, like your number is everything. They don't know anything about you personally or your struggles or, you know, your ups and downs and whether or not you actually are a good person. That you're totally judged on whatever your credit score, your credit payment history, your credit in general looks like. I would tell my 20-something-year-old self, if you can't afford the shit, don't buy it. If you don't have cash for it, don't buy it. If you don't have the money to go, don't make a way when you know that there are bigger things that you should be taking care of. So I would say money management. Money management. I would tell my 20-something-year-old self to get my shit together with my money and making sure that my credit is straight. Because then I would not have spent like a good portion of my 30s trying to correct everything that I freaking did in my 20s, because that pretty much from a finance perspective is what ends up happening. So I totally was just spending, and as with many people, spending much more than what it is that I had. And then I spent a good portion of my 30s cleaning up that mess. So I found that, you know, money is stressful, especially when you're trying to do shit. Like something as simple as shit like, I need a car. Guys, I can remember a time in my 20s, and at this point, you know, I'm living in Connecticut. It is the middle of the winter. It is freezing, and I am catching 2 buses to go cross town to go to my job. And with daylight savings time, by the time that I got off, it's dark, and now it's dark and it's cold. And when I tell you, I can vividly remember standing at the bus stop. I had like all layers that I possibly could have had on, you know, because at some point, those that can relate, you put on all these layers to try and stay warm, and then you out there, and then you hot. So your body is going through this mixture of, I'm hot with all these layers on, but I'm also cold at the same time. I remember standing there that night waiting for a bus to come home. It's like 5:30, 6 o'clock. It's in the dark. I'm at this bus stop. I'm by myself, and I was standing there just crying. Just crying. Do you know why I was crying? I was crying because I had been trying to get me a car. I could not get me a car. So my only alternative was for me to catch the bus, because I needed the money to work in order to pay for the bills, to try and correct everything that I had messed up on my credit in order for me to be able to get a car. So I was standing there and I was crying in the cold, hot and cold, in the dark, all because my credit was shit and I couldn't get me a car yet. So that is another thing that I would say. Finances. If you find yourself trying to keep up with the Joneses don't fucking exist. The Joneses don't exist. It is just this made up, imaginary presence of what you think other people are doing, and then you're trying to keep up with it. The Joneses don't fucking exist. You are your own Jones. So you need to be doing you within your budget. Don't be trying to keep up with what such and so is doing, because it's not going to do anything but be your downfall if you can't keep up, if you can't maintain, if you don't have the funds to feed the problem, which is you trying to keep up with other people. So let the Joneses go. And, you know, back when I was in my 20s, we didn't have social media. So now you're influenced 10 times as more. You're not only influenced by what's in magazines or what's on television. Now you're getting like live and direct and in person to what it is that people are doing. But understand that it's all entertainment. And a lot of things that are being posted out there are really out there just to get the conversation going. The poorest people spend the most money. The rich people don't. The wealthy people don't. The poor people spend the most money. The poor people are the ones with the jobs. Rich people have passive incomes and hobbies. There's a difference. So it's like educating yourself on the finance. That's something that, I totally wish that, you know, I would have learned that sooner than later, but shit, I got it now. It's all that matter. it clicked, because for some people it don't fucking click. So get in the hang of that. What else would I say? The whole mentality of find a job, get a job, keep a job. Let's talk about it. So I understand how I got to that point, because that's the environment that I grew up in, you know, understanding that I'm in a middle class family and my parents always worked 1 or 2 jobs, you know, to maintain everything that's going on. I didn't grow up poor, so I'm not even going to claim any of that. But I just understood it to be that, you know, once you find a job, you get a job, and you keep a job. And if you keep that job for a long period of time, like, you are completely winning. When, guys, that also is another load of bullshit. The only thing that a job is going to do is it's going to keep you above flow, allow for you to pay your bills if you're making enough money to do that, depending on the job or where you're living. But it's not the way to build substantial generational wealth. I wish I would have had myself a mentor back in my 20s to really talk to me about entrepreneurship, about, you know, owning my own business. And owning my own business is always something that I had wanted to do, but I didn't have anyone around me. And, you know, and that's well before we got to the whole, you know, presence of motivational speaking being forefront, and, you know, people sharing actually what it was they were doing, because sometimes you only saw that people were successful, but you never saw what it was that they did to get there. And everything was like hush hush and tight-lipped, and people were so afraid that if they shared what it was that they did to get to where they were, then all of a sudden you were taking something from them. So you had a very hard time getting yourself surrounded by people who was willing to do like mentorships and at least tell you the damn books that they read to just try and gear you to that direction. And that is something that, you know, in my 20s, I would say, find yourself a mentor. Come hell or high water, find yourself a mentor, start that business, try that idea, let it fail, and know that you are not a failure just because it fails. The fail is just an opportunity for you to try something new. The stress is just a sign for you to redirect, and you can try as many times as possible. You do not have to say, okay, I tried it this once, I quit, I'm going back to the 9-to-5 life. At least I know that's safe. One thing that I have learned at this point in my life is that there's no living for me in safe. We all are born with those basics, you know, the basics of life. And then it's up to us how it is that we decide to live that life. And that just getting up, going to work, and coming home and, you know, doing your regular mundane things that everybody in the world does, mind you. That's the basis of life. That's how you survive. That's how you live. But it's finding yourself outside of that is when you start living. And you always will make time to do stuff for the things that you are most interested in. You always will become disciplined with the stuff that you are most interested in. You will always be committed to the things or the people that you are most interested in. And I would really tell myself to look at that and assess it and become disciplined earlier in what it is that I want my future to look like. Start thinking generational. Get out of the selfishness of, oh, it's just me. Take into account that there is someone coming behind you. What is it that you're giving to the generations that comes behind you? Because like I said, you're not always going to be that young hot thing, right? You're not always going to be, you know, the smartest, the sharpest knife on the shelf. Like, you're not. You know, everything happens in waves. That's the whole circle of life. So it's like create, build, pass down. Give the gifts of mentorship, share knowledge, share information. To share knowledge costs nothing. it costs nothing. But some people feel like that, everything has to be capitalized on. And I think of it in a community state. Like if each one teach one. So if we all can teach each other something and share knowledge with each other, help. And especially for those that are really committed. So let's just be clear. This isn't for those that, are playing around, they can't stay focused. Every 5 minutes, they're like squirrel and they don't have their head in the game. This is for those that actually have their head in the game. And it's like align yourself with like-minded people. Support one another. When you're asking for help, make sure that you're bringing something to the table. It's like all of these things are things that I would tell myself 20-something-year-old self to prepare myself for where it is that I am now. Because sometimes I have felt like, damn, I'm behind the 8 ball on things, because when things really started clicking for me, that whole finance, that whole entrepreneurship, that whole community mentoring, when all that stuff started really clicking for me, I had to be like in mid-30s, like 35 or so. And so I was feeling like a little bit behind the 8 ball, because then I'm like, shit, I need to get my shit together, in order to do what it is that I want to do. So for everything it is that, I'm doing, I'm like, I cannot focus on building me a business if I'm stressed over money. So what do I have to do? I got to fix what I broke in my 20s. And so, I spent a lot of time, like I said, doing that. So it's like, things like that made me feel like I was behind the 8 ball, but then I had to circle it back and say, you know what? Those were my lessons. Those were my lessons that had to be learned, but then since I'm the one who did it, it was my responsibility to fix it. It's accountability. You can't say, okay, I had this boyfriend, and because I had this boyfriend back in my 20s, I let him use my credit card. He charged it up. Now I'm spending my 30s trying to pay for it. You got to take responsibility for that. He would not have been able to use your credit card if you did not give it to him, or if you did not charge it, or if you didn't put something on it for him when you knew he wasn't good for it to begin with. It's like I would believe people when they showed me who the hell they were the very first time they showed me who the hell they were, so that I could move accordingly and get the fuck up out their way. Because clearly our paths are not aligned, but I held on to people too long. That was something that I did in my 20s, because you have this misconception again of maybe that they'll come around, or it's something that you can work with, or after some time it'll be okay, it'll be all right. You slap every type of excuse on it to make yourself feel better about hanging around in situations that damn well you should have been out of how long ago. Exactly. So it's things like that. Those are things that I would tell my 20-year-old self. So it's like speaking with y'all now, I'm telling it to me back then, and then also at the same time, so proud of myself for finally getting it under control. I got this now. I got it. And it's so peaceful. I'm not stressed. Like, I can't even describe the level of peace I have. And I'm like, and it was because there were stresses that I was inviting into my life that I needed to let go. So whose fault is that? It's no one but my own. So I hope that this message has been helpful to you. And if there's something that you would want to tell your 20-year-old self, or if you want to tell some 20-year-old that happens to be watching this, just drop a note down in the comments, because you never know who might be reading it. You never know how your experience might ignite something in someone else, and you can really help them transition in their journey. All right, guys, talk to you later.